brought my computer to follow along. I'm not not paying attention.
That's okay. For sure. Alrighty. I'm glad you're here, Curtis. Hello, Anna and Mara and Emma and Mark. We've got Jade and Candace in the room too.
Hey.
Here, you can say hi.
Hey.
All right. Alrighty. We're going to talk about God today. But first, are there any lingering questions anyone has? I have several questions that were asked, probably not for this class, by several people who are here, but I'm going to answer them in front of everybody anyway. Any lingering questions from last week?
I hope one of mine is in there because I have more.
Okay, great. Jade, what's your more?
Okay, so I'd asked about Purim earlier because I knew costumes were a fun thing people did, but I didn't know how much they went out. So you gave me some examples, but as far as like even the carnival's coming up, like kind of what is kind of the like going in, should I like expect or be ready for? Or...
What to expect from Purim? Maybe that's what we'll start with next week. Okay. Is a more thorough what to expect from Purim, but that's not next week, right? That's the week after. Okay, good. Okay, that would have been a little scary.
It stresses you every time you have to ask that question.
Yes. Okay, so a couple things. First, Jade earlier today asked, okay, I know that costumes are worn on Purim, but what kind of costumes? What does that mean that costumes are worn on Purim? And so the easiest way to describe it is Halloween without the sexy and the scary. So anything else that you might wear for Halloween. Or I guess here, Mardi Gras, whatever you might wear to a Mardi Gras parade or something. A couple things, like I went as like an 80s person one year, and my friend and I went as two rabbis from a story in the Talmud because we were in rabbinical school, and probably not something I would do now, but but yeah. So whatever you have in your closet, even something that just is out of the ordinary for you to wear, it's a great thing to wear.
I have like a really cool Jedi costume. Is that something I can wear? Okay.
Please wear a Jedi costume.
Okay.
That sounds great.
I love that costume. Yeah.
Absolutely. Jedi costume's perfect. What else to expect? Our Purim Carnival for the community is basically just an opportunity to hang out with lots of people, and there are games and there are games and food and that sort of things. We'll start out with like a half hour of singing, but other than that, just a time to hang out. And then the Wednesday, what is it, March 16th? The evening of Wednesday, March 16th, we've got a Megillah reading. So Candace and Jade, you're both reading Megillah then. And a bunch of other people from our community will be reading the story of Esther. Starting at 6, we've got a covered dish dinner, so you can bring anything vegetarian. And if you realize day of that you haven't prepared anything, you can pick up a box of cookies from the store or come without anything, and that's good too. So we have that at 6, and then 7 o'clock we'll have our Megillah reading. There might be a spiel, a skit that's done at some point, and costume contest. We're figuring out details a little bit last minute, but that's our big celebration at Agudath Achim. That's our synagogue celebration. And then the next morning at 10 a.m. on the 17th, we'll be having a minyan, so prayer service in the morning, both in person, and I'll try to figure out some way to do it on Zoom as well. Yeah, and then we'll be reading the Megillah from the actual scroll at that service.
Like a new one, right?
Yeah, new one with vowels and trope, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because normally they're like the Torah, where they don't have any vowels or trope or punctuation or anything, which is kind of a pain to read.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited for this one. Still need to practice, though. So that's Purim. Let's see.
Do we have groggers?
Do we have groggers? We do. I just ordered a bunch. We have new groggers. And I also would like to set up, I was hoping for it to be on Purim Day, but it can't be. I'd like to set up also a food, like an opportunity for us to go to the food bank and volunteer there for a bit. The problem is that most of it's during school hours. So for both our adults who work in schools and for students, it might be hard to find a good time.
Right.
But one of the mitzvot of Purim is to give to those in need. And technically, you give to 2 people who you can see face to face. So if you live in an area or if you know a place where there are going to be people hanging out and asking for food or money, then you actively go to those places and hand food or money to those people. There's the mitzvah also of giving friends food. So we do that with our potluck, with our covered dish dinner, but also some people will just make little food packages and give them to friends.
That's cute.
Kind of like Valentine's in elementary school.
Yeah.
The other thing to know about Purim too that I don't think we covered is that one of the practices of Purim, and one thing that's often seen as a mitzvah on Purim, is to drink a lot. We don't really do that so much here, although you are welcome to bring alcohol to our Megillah reading. But that's something that lots of people do, and I thought it was funny that when I came here, people didn't know that.
See, I was like excited about that one last year.
Yeah.
But then I realized like nobody did it, and I was like, okay, I won't.
You can start a culture. We'll
We
see.
could start a culture.
If you have other people with you, might be weird if you were the only one, but
I will only judge slightly.
okay. Mark will only judge a little bit,
Okay, good.
slightly. Yeah, there's this idea that we're supposed to drink enough that we can't tell the difference between Haman and Mordecai, because Haman's the villain and Mordecai is one of the heroes.
Boo.
Well, you don't boo Mordecai. Just Haman.
No, but just Hamage.
Okay.
I was delayed whenever he said
Oh,
it.
probably.
I wonder if that's like a regional thing where everyone's, even here is like, oh, we don't really want to drink.
Yeah, maybe it's regional.
I wonder.
But it's in a bunch of Jewish law codes.
Yeah, interesting.
And I remember reading online at some point, and of course I'm sure this is just other like traditions or whatever, but that it was just the men who get like really drunk.
In some of the in some circles it would just be men, but like think practically why, right? If the women, what are the women responsible for?
No, kids, I guess.
The children. So you don't
Kids, I
really
guess.
want to get drunk around the children. And also it's immodest to get drunk for a woman.
Oh, of course. How can I
So-
forget?
Right. So along with other things that are gender segregated, this can be one of them, but doesn't need to be. Let's see. So another question that I got from Mara was actually 2 questions from Mara. So one is, do Jewish weddings ever happen on a Saturday or on a festival? And the easy answer is yes in some movements of Judaism. In movements of Judaism that don't focus so much on halakha, then yes, all day Saturday is up for grabs. Why might conservative and Orthodox Judaism not have weddings until after sunset on Saturday?
Because it's Shabbat and you're not supposed to work. Like you're not supposed to work. So the rabbi's not supposed to work, and the people who are putting the wedding together aren't supposed to work. And
yes, so the rabbi, fortunately or unfortunately, has to work regardless on Shabbat.
fair. I mean, yes, but
yeah. So what are some of the actions that might not be so kosher on Shabbat?
Well, you got writing, cutting, cutting cake, cutting food, heating food. They're probably going to be moving chairs or carrying a whole bunch of stuff around and kit and equipment. So most of them.
A lot of cooking stuff. And writing. So writing like with the ketubah, for example.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of, so the ketubah is the marriage contract.
They're really pretty.
It can be really pretty. So so it's ketubah is a marriage contract, and we'll get more to weddings a little bit later. But if you ever come over, you can see our ketubah.
Oh, awesome.
And so Mara says, I would imagine there are a couple of practical reasons, rabbi leading services, but also signing of ketubahs and breaking the glass. Yeah, breaking the glass is another big one. Go against the practices of keeping Shabbat. Like if I accidentally drop a glass and it shatters, that's not so much of a problem. But like if I'm destroying something deliberately, then that would go against keeping Shabbat. Thank you for saying mine was beautiful. So that would be, so in a conservative or Orthodox context, you could have a wedding on Saturday night, but that would except for in the winter, it might not start so late, but in the summer, it would start really late at night. So most Jews will have weddings on Sundays.
I never even thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. There are other times that we don't have weddings in the Jewish tradition also. So one is during the Omer. So Omer is the period of time between Passover and Shavuot, so late spring. And then the exception would be Lag BeOmer, which is this big celebration in the middle of that period of time. So lots of people get married on Lag BeOmer. So that's going to be like late April or like April, early May sort of thing. And then also in the intermediate days of holidays, so like Passover and Sukkot, they're both 7 or 8 day long holidays. So in the middle of those holidays, we typically don't get married because ein ma'arvim simcha b'simcha. So rejoicing should not be merged with more rejoicing. Right? We don't want to take away away the focus on bride and groom, and we don't want to take away the focus on the holiday. So we don't have weddings during those periods of time also. The other thing, and the other question that Mara asked was a really tricky one, and I can go more into it at another point in time, but I can start answering now. She asked, why not interfaith marriage? What's the deal with conservative rabbis not officiating at interfaith marriages? And there are a lot of different answers for that. My personal answer is that at an interfaith marriage ceremony, my job as a rabbi is to literally to officiate both members of the couple engaging in Jewish tradition together. And it wouldn't be honest, at least from my point of view, it wouldn't be honest for us to sorry, I got distracted. It wouldn't be honest for me to be officiating that ceremony for somebody who doesn't go along with, who doesn't believe the things that they're going to say. So some of the blessings that we might say, we'll start with, "Blessed are you, Adonai, my God, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe." And the thing is that when somebody is saying Adonai, our God, that has a very specific connotation. Different religious traditions have different ideas of God, and even though Jews have lots of different ideas of God, there are some ideas of God that really don't match up with the Jewish tradition. So for me personally, the reason why I wouldn't officiate an interfaith marriage is just because I don't think that it would be honest to the non-Jewish member of the couple to have them say these blessings. Now personally, as a conservative rabbi, I actually will be kicked out of my rabbi union if I officiate an interfaith marriage. But if it changes to be that it's permitted for conservative rabbis to do it, what I would like to do is to officiate some sort of ceremony that acknowledges that acknowledges the presence of both members of the couple. But right now, that's not an option for a conservative rabbi. We still are accepting of interfaith couples as members of our congregation, but I just can't officiate an interfaith marriage as a conservative rabbi. Questions about that?
Do they do that over there, or at B'nai Zion?
They do that at B'nai Zion.
Oh, okay.
I think she does like case by case basis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think she does it by case, and then say back at home. Rabbi Judy's view on it is she will do it as long as we're just speaking Hashem and not referencing like Christ or anything like that. She says if she does that, then if they have to use that verbiage, then she cannot officiate it or will not officiate it.
Yeah, and I think it could be similar to our cemetery right now has a rule that or we have an interfaith section, and it's written in the rules for our cemetery that that the rabbi of Agudath Achim needs to be the one to officiate at the funeral. So if somebody who's not Jewish is being buried in our cemetery, then I have the tools to officiate a funeral service that I have the tools and language to officiate a funeral service that's not necessarily Jewish, and I think in the same way I could officiate a wedding ceremony that's not necessarily, at least where one of the people being married, one of the couple is not Jewish.
Is that big empty spot, the big empty space?
Yes, that's the big empty space. Funny story about the big empty space. So if you've been to our cemetery before, which we should go as a field trip when we get to Death and Mourning, but kind of a funny story. So we set aside an interfaith section with a little fence around it just so that we can know this is the interfaith section of our cemetery, and there's a little side section because we've got two stones, and one of them has a name Rev so and so, and whoever built the fence for the interfaith section thought, oh no, it's a reverend. This is somebody who must be Christian. We'll include them in the interfaith section. But what they didn't know is that back in the day, Rev was just something that was just an honorific for anybody who was a holy person. It was like in Fiddler on the Roof where you'd say Reb Tevye, right?
I was wondering about that.
Hmm?
I was wondering about that from Fiddler on the Roof, because they would make the reference to it several times throughout, and I was not quite clicking, I guess.
Yeah, so it's like rabbi, like you're a learned person, so we'll call you Reb so and so.
That's fascinating. It's a beautiful cemetery. I love it.
Well, thank you. I'm really grateful for it, for our cemetery. I'm not grateful for how many pairs of shoes it's destroyed for me, but I am grateful for our cemetery. All right. And next weekend we will cover what cheese might be kosher or not. That was another question on our list. All right. Other questions that have about prayer or about anything we've covered so far?
Sorry, this is just like a really quick question because you mentioned talking about what's kosher and what's not kosher. Does fish count as meat in terms of like kosher rules?
It does not.
Okay.
It does not.
So you can mix fish and dairy?
Yes.
Interesting.
Absolutely. You can eat your tuna melt. Absolutely.
The fillet of fish is up for grabs.
Filet o fish, it depends what is in the filet o fish.
I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see. And what equipment it's cooked on. So next week we'll talk about that. We'll talk about cheese and fish and all of those things next week. All right. Let's go on to God. Let's talk about God. And first, actually before that, Mark reminded me that it was Curtis's birthday this Saturday. So happy birthday, Curtis.
Oh, happy birthday, Curtis.
Well, thank you.
Welcome. Hope you had a wonderful Saturday.
Oh, it was great.
Good. All right. Let me find where I put this PowerPoint. All right. This is a big topic. It's kind of hard to talk about God in an hour, but we'll make it work. So something really fascinating, I think, are these statistics about belief in God in the American population. So American Jews are kind of along the same lines as American non-religious people in belief in God. If you look, their percentages are around the same, right? 34% or believe in God or strongly believe in God among American Jews, right? And among the American non-religious, 30% strongly believe in God, right? So similar percentages for both, a lot less than American Christians, where 78.8% strongly believe in God. So let's unpack that a little bit. And before that, I do want to say, well, not only that, but if you look at the American Christians category, 78.8 strongly believe in God, and 19.2% believe but less certain. There's only 2% who don't believe in God or other. So we'll come back and ask why in a couple of minutes. This is from the Pew report of 2013. But one good answer is from a big story in our Torah, story of Jacob. Jacob and God wrestling. So Anna, would you read our story of Jacob wrestling with God?
Sure. Just from the top?
Just from the top.
And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Jacob." Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with God and man, and you have prevailed." Jacob asked, "Tell me your name." But he said, "You must not ask my name." And he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, meaning I have encountered God face to face, yet my life has been preserved.
Fantastic. All right. So 3 questions for you. One is, what's the general summary of what just happened in this story?
Jacob wrestled.
Yeah.
Jacob wrestled. Okay. My follow-up question, who in the world did Jacob wrestle with?
God
Okay, God is one answer for sure.
and man.
And
And he
man.
has prevailed.
Yes. God, so this other being that Jacob is wrestling with, some people will say it's himself, some people will say it's God, some people will say it's an angel, some people will say it's his brother Esau. But regardless, what Jacob's name becomes is the one who wrestles with God, Yisrael. El means God, and Yisra is the one who struggles with, or he will struggle with. And so we, the Jewish people, are now the ones who wrestle with God. That's our definition. We are the ones who wrestle with God. Right? Anything else we're learning from this story before we go on?
What he named the place.
What he named the place, Penny Ale. I have encountered God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. So what significance does that lend to our understanding of Judaism, or of what it means to wrestle with God?
It's a shot in the dark here, but that you can, I guess, wrestle with, or even like literally wrestle against, go with like the idea of God. I'm not interesting. And you can walk away. You can learn and move.
I love
It's not.
that.
I'm trying to articulate that came out a little weird, but
Yeah. I have stood up to God face to face and said, I don't know if I believe in you, or even if I do, what that really means. And the ground is not going to open up and swallow you whole. You might actually come out from that encounter with more strength and belief.
That's exactly what I meant, and you said it in a much more succinct way.
I just think, like, I've been thinking a lot today. I don't know if phrases show up in your head, get stuck in your head, but today my phrase of the day is, the ground's not going to open up and swallow you whole.
It's good to remember.
Were you going to say something, Jade?
It was in the same vein with what Anna was saying. It does feel like a struggle sometimes, just like a fight against, like, what do I believe and why do I believe it and what is any of this for? But like you don't die, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just it doesn't kill you to explore that and to, I don't know, fight to, I don't know. See, I'm like her. I can't really find the words, but in the same vein.
Yeah, we wrestle with our words, and we wrestle with this idea of God, and hopefully we come out for the wiser.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. We talked about this a little bit. Yisrael is the name given to Jacob in Genesis 32. It's the name of the Jewish people. It's literally means wrestles with God. And we should also put number 4. It's the name of a country that happens to be in the Middle East. What do you think Yisrael?
I can't imagine.
You can't imagine. If you get rid of the Y, it's Israel. I don't really see that as necessary, but there was another slide here about personal theology, but I'm not so. I don't really see the necessity of that. But before we go on, I do want to ask, does this idea of wrestling with God contribute at all to our understanding of that chart that we saw at the beginning, of the pie chart that we saw at the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's clearly a universal struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? We can have days where we don't believe wholeheartedly in God. Right? Just as long as we're, trying to get there in some way. I think we see this most often, and I've told some of you about this. We see this most often in Psalms. We see this most often in Psalms because you see just a total, depending on what Psalm you read, some of them are angry at God. Some of them are like, where in the world are you, God? Some of them are, yay, God is wonderful and here all the time. And all of these are valid and part of our sacred text. All right, so Mara does want to look at this.
Yeah, I was.
You want to get there too? Okay, great. the name of each Western monotheism contains a verb of relationship with God. And so let's see what Mara learns from this, and also from what Candace learns. So Mara says, just thinking about the graphic of Christians versus Jews, if you identify as a Christian, it generally signifies that you have a belief in God, and specifically as Jesus as the Savior. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jews can identify as Jews on more of a cultural basis and still not be sure of whether or not they believe or how strongly. Additionally, it's hard to believe in something you cannot name. Oh, I like that additional part too. So you're bringing up 2 points here. One is that Judaism is not just a religion. It's something that a lot of people are born into, and it's a culture. So it's a whole bunch of different things that doesn't necessarily have to include belief in there. But also, it's hard to believe in something you cannot name. God has so many different names, and there are so many different ways to think about God that it's hard to name that as belief. What were you thinking looking at this?
I was reading that message, and I was thinking of the pie charts, because I was just really confused by that 2%, because unlike Judaism and Christianity, I mean, it's not like it's not really a culture. I don't think you're not like, it's not an ethnicity or anything like that. So I'm really confused by these 2% of people who call themselves Christians but don't believe in God. And so I was just looking at that message. It was nice. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that because that was strange.
Well, it's maybe the people. Yeah, Emma?
Sorry, I can sort of, because I was doing a lot of thinking about why I was kind of feeling upset about some points of leaving the Church of England, but it's because the Church of England in particular is just so enmeshed in my history, in the history of the country. It's like, there is kind of a historical tie, because, it goes down to our entire system of law, the split from the Catholic Church, and just like the legal system as well still is founded a lot on some of those ideals and principles, and it a lot of the things, like, it can be hard to explain, but like some of the ways we view the world, like as like a whole schism with the Catholic Church was about the individuality, because we used to have the Catholic Church as the highest court of law in the country till the whole thing happened, and that was actually till King Henry, the King Henry VIII's divorce was actually just the tip of the iceberg. There was a whole bit of bone of contention underneath with the country about that, and their own beliefs about wanting to go their own way and stuff. So I would say there's like a more of a set of principles that stem from the religion itself, because I'm not too, like that's what you derive from it. Like it's deeply enmeshed into just the principles of the country and the morals it kind of holds in the way it goes about it, as opposed to like overt, obvious, like it's not like there's a specific song for, associated with it, or a food group. It's that kind of thing. So it's harder to pin your finger on it.
Right.
On that, I would even think about like work culture. Like if you work somewhere like a Starbucks, there's that culture that's associated there. I'm still confused about like Christian specifically.
Well, that's my thing. It's like I don't think there's anybody out there calling themselves a Christian while actively not believing in God. But I understand what Emma who was speaking? Mm-hmm. What Emma was saying. I understand, but I'm confused by that statistic, because I don't know.
Well, I'd love to see the rest of the study.
I think Mara, the Pew study is like very controversial in the clergy world, because there are a lot of things they didn't ask that they should have asked. But it'd be interesting to look over again. They did another study last year, but it wasn't as controversial as the 2013. Because basically the 2013 study was religion is dying.
Gotcha.
Well, I mean, one could be considered Christian if the family has a huge belief and they're kind of following the motions to kind of make everyone happy. I mean, you can go through the motions but not completely believe, and I think that's where some of these statistics come up, like kids or some adults.
I do get that. I kind of did that with Catholicism like my entire life. So
yeah, and I think a lot of I think in a lot of cultures, like Catholicism is a big part of the culture, where like, I mean, I know some Irish Catholics who like the religion thing isn't their big thing, but they'll say that they're Catholic because
it's much like that with like Mexicans, like it's like imagery's everywhere, and like I get it.
I think also there's a good amount of people. Mara and I have a friend who I don't know what their belief is about Christianity, but everyone in Italy is Catholic.
Yeah.
Emma's saying, "Yep, I'm down here with Matt, who does not believe in Catholicism, but always goes to Mardi Gras parades." So Mardi Gras is a good example, but I think Mara and I have a friend who loves going to church. Not sure about their religious beliefs, but it's a nice place to be with people, and especially if you're going to a religious community that inspires you to be a better person.
Yeah.
You might ascribe to that.
Yeah, I'm getting way too technical.
No, but I like that. This is important because this is a page that I didn't think much about, but now I'm thinking. So one of our big prayers in Judaism is the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. I think we said last week that if there's any prayer that that a Jewish person who grew up in Hebrew school remembers from childhood, this is going to be it. So quite literally, Shema is listen or hear. Yisrael is the people Israel, or God wrestlers, if you want to be specific. Adonai, or Yud He Vav He, is our God. Adonai is one. So God is one. There are three big points here. God is one, so Adonai Echad. Adonai is one. God is both transcendent, bigger than us, right? That there's the idea of Adonai as being like, Adonai literally is, Yud He Vav He is a verbal form of to be, and it's not quite was or will be or is, but kind of an amalgamation of all of that. So God is literally just is everywhere. We don't know where or when, but God is both transcendent and immanent, involved with us. So God is, even though God is transcendent, God is also involved intimately with the people Israel. Okay. Let's see. On the other hand, it might be easier to accept a concept of God that isn't nailed down, like in Judaism, because God can be many things. If a concept of Jesus or a more human image as God isn't something that don't accept, maybe isn't something that we can accept, Judaism with a less defined version of God might mesh better with one's personal philosophy or outlook, right? And I mean, we can even see this with this picture here, where in one place, if we're looking at the Hebrew here, in one place we have God is written down as God, okay? God is written down with this hey and a apostrophe, which is pronounced Hashem, which is the name. God is written down as Adonai, which is like this holy name of God. We don't write it in the Hebrew because we're not supposed to ever erase it. It's a holy name, so we represent it with the symbology for Hashem. And when we're praying, we'll say Adonai. And then here, to represent the sacred name in the Hebrew, it's written as YHVH. Right? So even on this one page that's talking about the oneness of God, you've got these multiple identities, right? These multiple different understandings of God, and all are valid. Before we go on, what might it mean that God is one?
I think about wholeness. And also maybe just that there is one God.
The one.
Yeah, there is one.
There's no other God. Yeah. This is it. Great. So God is wholeness. There is no other God. I also think of it more in in a universal way as well. Like God is one. God is everything. There's a preschool version that kids will sing. God is everywhere and God is one. God is everywhere and God is one. Like, it's this oneness of God. What might it mean? What does it mean that God is our God?
Is that going back where you should have no other gods before you?
You should have no other gods before you. Oh, so like looking back in the biblical time, like in biblical times.
Stuff,
yeah.
Is what I would think, like literally, like.
I love that. So we are in this special covenant with God. We made a promise, or we made a promise with God. You're it.
Whereas some others might believe in multiple, one for prosperity, one for the different seasons or whatever's going on. I was just thinking of another neighbor I live near that I had a hard time grasping the different ones, I guess.
Right, and especially during that period of time, during the biblical period of time, there are different gods that are leaders of different locales, and this idea of God as both our specific God and a universal God is totally revolutionary. I do want to go back to this, but I love this exercise. If you have your books in front of you, it might be easier to see this, but if you're able to read this, that's good too. I can zoom in on anything you'd like. But what I'd like you to do is to put a check by 5 or more names that you feel comfortable with or are meaningful to you, and an X by 5 or more names that you don't feel comfortable with or are not meaningful to you. And then if something's weird to you, if it surprises you or you don't understand, you want to discuss it, then put a question mark by that. And if you're at home, you can either annotate on the screen, or you can write on a separate piece of paper, or in your book if you have one. And I'll give 3 to 5 minutes. These are all names that are used in Jewish liturgy and in Tanakh.
Emma, did we lose everyone?
I think she dropped off. There she is.
Okay, cool.
Formatted in
I thought I did it as soon as I annotated on the screen. I was like, oops, and it's gone.
Oh no. So let's get started. Even if you're not finished, that's okay. I'd love for everyone to share one name that you're comfortable with and one name that you're a little uncomfortable with. And if you have one you have a question about, or something that surprised you, you can share that too. Emma, will you start us off?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was comfortable with obviously the ones we're more familiar with, but also 27. I won't try to pronounce it, but like our shepherd, because that seemed very familiar with me. I definitely wasn't comfortable with the ones around war generally. So like the 30 Master of Armies, that doesn't sound. And I will say the two that I was just like, I can understand why those are in there, because obviously there is war in the so that makes sense. But the two that perplex me, because I just found them unusual, is 41 and 47. So the hidden one and nothingness.
Those are good. And those are both Kabbalistic names. So, and Kabbalah is something that some people love and some people don't quite understand. I'm one of those people that there are some ideas that are nice, but some ideas that are not are a little bit confusing. But I love that. So we'll address those for sure. And also you got, I don't know if you heard in the background, but you got a yes for the ones about war, for sure. How about Mark? How about you?
So I'm more comfortable, I guess, with the first couple because, they're in the prayers on a daily. I think the one, number 6, is the one that I wasn't comfortable with, terrifying one. I don't really see it that way.
Right, and what's interesting to me too is that El Norah doesn't necessarily mean the god of terror. Norah is both, it can mean terror, but it can also mean awe. Like it's this idea that we hear a lot, El Hagibor B'Hanorah. So
I think that may be where I was getting confused.
Yeah, and we use it a lot in the high holidays, like on this day where we don't know what's going to happen in the next year, but God, you are so awesome that can you just make it good, please? You have that power. Great. Any others that were perplexing for you?
I think the hidden one got me, number 41.
Yeah, the hidden one. Nice. All right. Curtis, did you have any that you were more comfortable with or uncomfortable with?
I was comfortable with a lot of them. I think the ones that were already, I'm not really uncomfortable with any of them. I don't really remember hearing, growing up, oneness, or I didn't know that shalom was a name for God. So I thought that one was interesting.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything else, is either in a song or I've heard it going to services, either with Tessa or growing up at Christian church. So I think pretty much there. But yeah, that one stood out to me. I didn't realize that actually was a name for God.
Nice. And what I love is that Emma and Mark and Curtis all said, well, I'm comfortable with these ones because I've heard it before, right? I've heard these names before. There's something that I'm comfortable with because I've said them in services and it's something that's like in my kishkas, in my, in something that's familiar to me to say and to read. All right. How about Mara?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would say I'm kind of the opposite of Curtis, where I'm pretty relatively uncomfortable with most of them, especially the ones that reference Father. That to me is very like Christian sounding language, Catholic, which if I'm going to pick any religion, it's not going to be that one. So the Father, I have issues with. I didn't like the ones about war either. I was surprised actually to see a soulmate on there, but I can sort of see how that works. Like if you're thinking about, I mean, this is like Catholic, but like nuns and monks who devote their lives to God, and like, so in that way they don't marry, but they have, you know, God as their soulmate. So it makes sense, even though I was surprised to see it on that list. Yeah, so I like more of like the shalom piece. I also liked the 49 Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be what I will be, because it kind of leaves room for interpretation, to sort of accept a God that makes sense to you personally. Yeah, a lot of the other ones are a little bit hierarchical, like king, for my taste. I did want to say that a couple of people said they were confused by the hidden one, but to me that sort of makes sense in a way that God is not always easily perceived or felt or seen, but that God is always there if you are a religious person who believes in God.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Thank you. And I wanted to say with Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, number 49, that's what God says to Moses when Moses says, "What's your name? I'd love to know your name. Nice to meet you." And God says, "I will be what I will be. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. You don't know me."
I think that one confused me because I remember hearing it once. I just couldn't remember the context in which, you know, it was mentioned.
Yeah, it's said as right? I will be what I will be, or I will be. I love that interpretation of it, Mara, that I'm going to be what you need me to be. And we had a bat mitzvah student in October who gave her whole Devar Torah, her whole speech on God being who we need God to be at different times. Anna, how about you?
Yeah, so I actually, in terms of what I'm comfortable with, I had a very similar reaction to many of the other people in this class. Like the comfort comes with having used them before, having heard them before, Adonai, Eloheinu, like all of those were, you know, pretty comfortable to me. But I also had a similar thought to Mara when we were talking about the hidden one. So I was like, yeah, like I wouldn't necessarily call it a comfort with using that term because I've never used it before, but it makes sense because I think kind of the part of the point is that God is not observable, but is also not, if that's what you believe, not non-existent, but kind of hidden. So that made sense to me. Weirdly, one of the ones that I was less comfortable with was number 3, the Holy Blessed One. And it I don't know if I was just taking it the wrong way, but it's like, blessed by whom? Like, you're God. Why are you, like, you're the one doing the blessing. You're blessed by whom?
Right. And there's this prayer that we say at the beginning of services, Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach. So bless who is blessed. And then the people say, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Blessed be the one who is blessed forever and ever. And it's such a funny prayer, right? Because God's already blessed.
Like
what
circular.
does God need our blessing for?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lots of answers to that, but you're not alone in thinking that that's a little strange.
Right. It's like, you're the one doing the blessing. Who are you blessed by if you're God? And like, honestly, like I had a similar reaction to the eternal judge, because it struck me as very Christian. Like it struck me as very like, when you die, God will judge you and God will judge your life and whether you were good enough. And so it's like, okay, but like in the Jewish context, it's like judge of what? Like to what end? Because we've talked about how there's a pretty fluid view of afterlife. So like, what are you judging and how and why? So I'm not necessarily saying I'm uncomfortable with it. I just had questions.
Yeah, nice. And that's a good point in that in the afterlife, there's that question of how does this have to do with the Jewish afterlife? When somebody dies, also there's a saying that we say, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, blessed is the judge of truth, and that's supposed to be our response when we hear somebody has died. That I guess God knows what God is doing, but you're right. Like, how does that fit into this theology with all these different views of afterlife?
Okay, so I was not alone in thinking similar to that.
Right. So I'll put a question mark and a little X. Jade, I know you were nodding to a lot of these. Were there any extras that you really loved or didn't love?
Oh, I'm in love. Well, I'm in line with a lot of what people were saying. I think my favorite might be number 20.
Nice.
And I definitely can relate. I don't like the ones that, you know, here, like the feeling of like kind of I don't even want to say a patriarchal figure because it's not the fact it's like our father that makes you maybe it is, I don't know.
No, it's very much the male stuff for me.
I don't like gendering God. I feel like if it's supposed to be this larger presence, why is there any type of subscription? Human.
Oh yeah, I was reading about it this week.
So and even like our books that I noticed during service you'll kind of avoid saying him, and like even when I catch it in the book, like I try not to. I feel like that's something that I'm not really comfortable with. I really love the ones that are about peace and healing and wellspring of life and all of those. I think that's 23. Yeah. And I also was questioning 27, but in hearing everybody talk, my take now with that one is kind of if he's the God, if he, and listen to me now, if God is infinite, then that includes nothingness, that yeah, oh yeah, 47. That has to exist. I mean, nothingness. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That has to be part of it. If there's a universe that exists, then there's also the God of nothingness. So I don't know the context, but I don't know. I feel like I get that one.
Right. And that's kind of how that's kind of how it's explained in Kabbalah, where you've got Ein Sof, which is that literally means there is no end. And if there is no end, then God must be in the stuff that's not present as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
God's in both the presence and the absence.
Cool.
And also the good and the bad.
Right.
Candace, did you have any extra that?
Well, I said I didn't like Ain either because it was too emo.
Ain because it's too emo.
It's way too emo.
Got
for
it.
me. And I remember this exercise specifically last year. My answer to what I'm uncomfortable with is the same. I don't like the masculine stuff because I don't like gendering God. And what I like now, I like Hashem, the name. Gets the job done. I wrote down it sounds like a cool Western character.
Do-do-do.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's great. I have so I agree with a lot of people here, and especially like with the with the masculinity, that always kind of throws me. And I can always find a way to translate, or I can almost always find a way to translate, except, and because I can always use the argument that Hebrew is really two genders. It's either feminine or miscellaneous, and miscellaneous can include male, and therefore we can say that we're talking about here the ruler of rulers, or the merciful ancestor or merciful parent. But one that I have not been able to figure out what to do with is Adonai. I actually, for me, Adonai is the most troubling name, because I can't figure out a non-gendered way to translate that. And Adonai is the word the name that we use to replace Yud Hey Vav Hey. I love Yud Hey Vav Hey, but that's always troubling for me.
Yeah, and I remember last year I said I was cool with Adonai because I heard it so much, because I heard it all the time and I was cool with it. But now I'm cool with that one. I don't know.
Yeah. And I like it because of what it represents, but the name itself really throws me. And one that I really love is Ahuv, beloved, because I think, so some of you had said, oh, I don't like this name because it reminds me too much of Christianity. And for me, I don't have a background in Christianity, and so I don't have really associations, and I really think that we should be talking about God as love more in the Jewish tradition. I think historically we have not talked a lot about love in Judaism, because it's seen as such a Christian way of talking about God, but it's really that idea of God as love, or as our beloved, is all over our prayers. Yadid Nephesh, the one with the question mark, number 9, starts out our Kabbalat Shabbat service. Not every week, because some weeks we jump around, or most weeks we jump around, but there's a beautiful song, Yadid Nephesh, beloved of the soul, that starts out this service. So I love Yadid Nephesh. I love Ahuv, beloved, all of the ones having to do with love. Because I think that's really especially with the Ve'ahavta as a central prayer, that you should love God with everything you've got. I think it's central for us.
And it comes back to the balance. I think I can't speak for everyone who grew up in a more Christian circle, but it almost always, in my experience, turned into a toxic positivity, where, God is love. How can you be upset, if you have God? How can you complain about your suffering, or how can you be, anything but in a space of gratitude ever, if you have God? And I don't know, what I've found is, and I'm new here, but there's appreciation for, hey, we've had a really hard time too, but we can also appreciate the times of joy. So
it's like on the Sims game when it said, but remember that we suffered after they broke the glass.
Right.
Oh.
I remember, yeah.
We have to go back to the Sims.
We had a Jewish wedding in our Sims.
That's so much fun.
But yeah, it's coming back to the balance. I can appreciate all of these, because there are the ones that I don't care for, if that makes sense. I don't know.
And I think it's fun that, like, some people think that things are comfortable, and some people think that those same things are terrible, and it's, we all are available to us in our liturgy. All right. Mark and Mara want to talk about, okay, so number 1, doesn't the Lord's Prayer begin, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name? So it's strange to me that our Father in heaven would be listed in Jewish names for God. I don't know about the Lord's Prayer. Is that how the Lord's Prayer begins?
Yeah.
But we absolutely have Avinu Shebashamayim in our liturgy, and I would imagine it comes from similar biblical sources.
Well, yeah. Like I've noticed since being at the Catholic school, like they took a lot and like translated it over, and so I would assume that came from that.
Probably somewhere in Tanakh. I can look to see where the source of that is, but I would imagine it's somewhere in Tanakh because we share that. And then, can we take a quick second to talk about 25, becoming, and what that might mean, how that might be imagined as God? So Ehyeh, Ehyeh literally means I will be. So what might that mean? That God means I will be, or that one of the names of God is I will be?
That's like relative to number 49, I would assume.
Yeah, right. Similar to number 49, I will be.
I was wondering, I'd love to know like where these are located, because I wonder if in the text it's somewhere along with I was and I, will be and I am.
Right. So let's see the names that have to do with that. I was, I will be, I am. So Yud He Vav He, YHVH, that's our holy name of God that we don't say. It was said way back, the priests in the Holy Temple once a year at Yom Kippur, and it's the name that we use in prayers to talk about God. So we say Adonai instead of Yud He Vav He, and a lot of Jews won't even say Adonai unless they're actually saying the prayer. They'll say Hashem instead. They'll say Hashem until they actually are saying the prayer. Where are the other ones? We had the Ehyeh, becoming, and I haven't really seen that other than where 49 is mentioned, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. Maybe it's used in some Kabbalah, but I'll look for it. Where's Anochi is I am. So Anochi is from the very beginning of the Ten Commandments. So Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am Adonai your God. Right? So that's the first commandment, is I am God. What is it commanding? Who knows? But the first commandment is I am God.
I'm recognizing a lot of these from like Friday night service.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of them show up. And I think that's why our Friday night service has all these names, is because for some of us, some of these names are really complicated and some of them are what we need. Was there an I was somewhere?
Not that I saw on its own.
No. Okay.
There's the I am, which is 33.
Yeah, I am 33. Right, that's Anochi, which is really just I. But yeah, amazing. Does the becoming, did the Hebrew translation as I will be, was that at all helpful for becoming? Yes. Okay, good. Good. I love this list a lot. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I think we'll move on to the next part. And if we have extra time at the end, we can go over Adon Olam, which is a great prayer. But for now, this is the Midrash cadence that's in about for her bat mitzvah, and I'll read it just so I can explain a little bit about what's happening. So this is a Midrash on Sinai. We're all standing at Sinai and we're listening to God. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, God's speech came to every individual according to their capacity. Do not be surprised by this. When the manna descended for Israel, it tasted differently to everyone. So manna is the stuff that God fed the desert, fell from the sky. And so it shows up in lots of different ways and is described in lots of different ways. So this Midrash is saying, is explaining the manna and also God. So to the infants, it tasted like their mother's milk. The manna tasted like their mother's milk because that's what they needed. To the young, it tasted of bread and oil and honey. That's quoted from Ezekiel. And to the elders, it tasted like wafers made of honey. That's from Exodus. In the same way that manna tasted different in everyone's mouth according to their uniqueness. so each individual heard God's speech according to their uniqueness. So even at Mount Sinai, each of us heard God's speech according to our own capabilities and our own uniqueness, our own needs.
That's so nice.
I think so too. The next thing I'd love to do is, after all of this, and after the decades that you've lived thus far, I'd love for us to each create a 100-word theology. Oh. Okay. I'd love for each of us to create a 100-word theology, and you can see some examples in your in the textbook if you have it. There are some examples here, and I'll turn the page in a couple minutes so that you can see other ones. But I'm going to challenge you to write your understanding of God in just 100 words. And keeping in mind that that understanding of God is not going to be the same that it was yesterday, and it's probably not going to be the same as it will be tomorrow. So I'll give us at least 5 minutes, and if we need more time in 5 minutes, I'll give us more than 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, I got the blue screen of death on my computer. What were we doing?
Well, good. We are going to write our 100-word theology. We're going to write out what we believe about God today, because we know that it'll be different yesterday and tomorrow. And we can use these as examples, these rabbis' examples. Okay. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing either their 100 words or part of their 100 words?
I could.
Great. So Anna and then Candace.
Okay. So this was just kind of stream of consciousness, but mine was, my theology is incomplete. God is possible but not observable, or at least not yet observable to me. My theology is not God is, but is God? Is God the source of life and everything, or is God a guide to where we have been, are now, and will be? Is God a judge or a teacher? I don't know. Does God manifest in the usefulness of people's belief in a God, or in the destruction and pain coming of people's belief in a God? Is God simply cohesiveness and tradition that ties people and generations together? I don't know. So there's a lot I don't know.
Which is great. But what I love is that you have possibilities. You have some hypotheses there.
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts, but few answers.
That's where the wrestling comes in. How about Candace?
Okay, so this is an interpretation of what I wrote, but I wholeheartedly believe in God because I experienced God in a bunch of amazing, incredible ways, such as the time I got a huge unexpected bonus, or the time I prayed for over 10 years to play on stage with Green Day, and I did. But it can also be much less little, seemingly trivial things. Like I said this last year too, it could be a song on a song on the radio that plays at just the right time, or a chance encounter with somebody on the street. Can be the way the sky looks. God is truly one. They are everywhere and everything.
I like they as a pronoun for God.
Oh, yeah.
I can share mine. Mine is also kind of stream of consciousness and is certainly not everything. I have to add a couple words in there. So let's see. So God is what and who gets me out of bed in the morning. God is in the moments I learn about God from a 12-year-old and with 500-pound dog. God is loving, kind, funny, and learning along with us. God created and is creating a world that exists through physical and biological principles, partnering with us to discover the best ways to move forward. We follow God's mitzvot as an act of love and to train ourselves towards that best possible future for ourselves and for those who will come after us. Right. Any last words to share?
I guess I'll go.
Great.
So I put, I'm not sure that I'll ever really truly understand the full gravity of my relationship with God. What I do know is that I have expressed and made a very real commitment to working towards that has on many occasions left me feeling alone, confused, uncertain, and fearful. That being said, it's also brought about experiences of great joy and triumph. I hope one day I understand what all this is for. Until then, I guess I'll just do my best to keep up my end of the bargain.
I like that as a covenant, my end of the bargain, because it is a partnership. The last thing I'd like for us to do is to sing a song together. If you know this, wonderful, and if not, look a little bit at the English that comes along with it. This is really we sing this at the end of services, mostly on Saturday mornings here, although different congregations will sing it differently. And it's this beautiful idea of the transcendence and God is with me, body, soul, God is with me, I'm not afraid. And especially with the beginning, into God's palm I placed my spirit when I wake and when I sleep. But I think each person is going to find one or two lines of this that can resonate. The lovely thing about Adon Olam is that it goes along with any tune that you want it to. So, you could do it to the Imperial March, as many people have before. You could do it to Yankee Doodle Dandy or to Auld Lang Syne. I'm just going to sing one that we often sing in synagogue, but if you come to services and you have a recommendation or one that you really want us to sing at the end, be my guest. Please let me know before services, because sometimes they take a while to figure out how to fit it in. But if you know this, please sing with me. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzirni le'nasa b'chetzo kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yiyeh בתפארה והוא אחד ואין שני להמשיל לו להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצורכב לי בעת צרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו אפקיד רוחי בעת אישן ועירה ואם רוחי גביעתי אדוני לי ולא אירא. Thank you for learning with me today. I think I was wrong about kashrut coming next week, but because I talked about it so much, we'll talk about kashrut next week. We'll switch it up. But have a wonderful evening. Lovely to learn with you.